We want to get started here with serving pretty soon. I'm going to turn it over to Dave Cole so he can get up here as the master of ceremonies, Judge the Honorable David Cole. Wayne called a couple of days ago and said, "You're coming to Galens Pride Party?" I'll be there. He said, "Would you MC?" And I said, "Flying me." He made up some response that he knew would inflate my ego enough to at least get a yes answer out of that matter. But I want to say a couple of things about Galens, then I want to turn it over to whoever wants to say anything about Galens. I think we have a limit. I think that's the up my six. So whether it be a praise party or a roast or whatever it is we need to keep in mind our time limit. Wayne is probably the nicest hospitality you've ever seen in Galens. Everybody knows, of course, that was the cover story. Galen thought until 20 minutes ago he was going to the Taco Bell. When Wayne takes it a lunch, he really takes it a lunch. But the look on Galen's face, I'm hoping that the ladies can camera capture this because we're really going to be working on it at some point in time. Maybe a couple of months somewhere. Because it was a look of absolute what in hell is going on. Of course, as I told Wayne, I've seen that look on Galen's face more than once. And Wayne never responded. So I asked Casey Arden from the Supreme Court, that was the look he had on his face the whole time. And he laughed and I said, "Oh, that's the Supreme Court. I thought it meant the other court." Well, in any event, there's a couple of things about Galen that I know people like John Todd and perhaps Paul and other people and those that would like to speak more. Greg, I know wants to make a comment that maybe taking a last. I'll let you do close the last, but I want to make the very last thing because I think it's kind of, you can tie Galen up in a nutshell, and we've all wanted to do that over once. You can tie Galen up in a nutshell, but the last thing I want to say about it, like a lawyer, I hope we'll do that. So certainly Greg will get it up as soon as we can. I first met Galen in 1979. I was somewhat happily employed as a prosecutor down in Houston County, whereas you may know, defense lawyers and the prosecutors can't agree on the time of day. They can't even agree what part of the sky is. A very trial-oriented office is what I'm trying to say, especially compared to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, where if you try more than 3 cases in a year as a lawyer, you're considered a senior deputy county attorney. And I'm not kidding by much. But in any event, I've had it with that atmosphere where lawyers couldn't trust each other, and the two chief lawyers in the offices who will remain unnamed, those of us of my vintage know who we're talking about anyway, the personalities were such that the lawyers just couldn't agree about anything. And when I heard that Bill Schaefer was looking for yet another assistant AG, I leaped at the chance, got lucky enough to get the first interview, and that's when I first met Galen, who, as I recall, somewhat uncharacteristically during that interview, sat almost mute. Now, I didn't say move. He let, I was on to, there he is, Ron. He let Ron ask all the questions during the interview. Somehow I managed to get past that first interview, and I was pleased to see. You have to understand that growing up in Tucson, yes, the nicest city to live in, I continue to maintain. Growing up there, Bill Schaefer was an icon. He was the county attorney when I was in high school. And you heard nothing but wonderful things about Bill Schaefer. So when I had the chance to work for him, I really wanted to take advantage of that opportunity. Well, I made it to the first interview with a great guy who was one of the reporters to my wife. I made it to the first interview. But good luck on the second. Second interview, I don't even recall who was part of it, but somehow I made it through that. I think Fane may have been one of my interviewees, and perhaps Dan Castle. if he wasn't down at the finish line, one of those Aryan Brotherhood types, I didn't have him. I just don't recall. Somehow made it through that process. So the last interview was the most interesting. It was the interview with the preeminent William J. Schaefer. Sitting in Bill Schaefer's library, waiting to take a book here. This isn't about Galen, but this is the other side story to produce a little bit, I hope. I'm waiting for this person who I've heard so much about but have never actually laid eyes on to appear. And then walks this guy in a paint, no tie, didn't have pants, didn't have a belt, didn't have shoes, and a shirt that I really can't describe very well. Looked at me and said, "Hello, who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Dave Cole. I'm here to interview with Mr. Schaefer for this job." He said, "Well, that's good because I'm Billy Schaefer." And the interview went from there. Well, the good news is he hired me. The bad news is that Galen got stuck with me for the next couple of years. Bill had a belief, and may still have the belief, I don't know, I haven't talked to him since he retired. He promised to stay in touch, but I haven't seen him since he left the board back in late January. Every once in a while I get an email, but now that the court admin has told the judges that our old email system isn't good anymore, and we're switching to Outlook, which is supposedly better. I've not heard one word from Bill Schaefer. In any event, Bill had an abiding belief that lawyers occupy cases in chairs. That's CAIRS. And so Galen and I managed to get chairs on a series of cases, one of which involved not only numerous but frequent trips to the thriving metropolis of Avondale, back before I went through. So what that meant was you jumped on Van Buren at some point and you went to what seemed like the end of the earth before you finally reached the outskirts. Both outskirts, both the left and right, are about the same place for Avondale as they were at the time. We went out there, I can't count the number of times to interview police officers, and it was a delight because Galen almost always wanted to drive, which always worked for me, and he always had fun things to say on the way out, and maybe not so fun things on the way to say back after our interviews had not provided us with the evidence that we thought we might have liked to hear. But those were, at the very least, fun times. We tried a couple of cases together. The one that I'm not sure he's ever quite forgiven me for, I think I tried maybe one or two homicides with him. I wasn't important enough to get to big cases, but I guess I was a young lawyer at the time, which, as you can tell, is no longer true. But in any event, Galen and I got assigned a murder case. Now, I think Galen's unfavorite moment was when his co-prosecutor, George Truly, decided that the way to really impress the jury was to take the murder weapon, which in this case, thank God, was a knife, not a gun, and hand it to the defendant while the defendant was testifying and say, "Insert the knife you used to slay." And Galen just about came out of his shirt. I think he was afraid that somebody else might be attacked with a knife. That, of course, didn't occur to me. How long is it going to impress the jury? I think we got a second degree out of that. I don't remember for sure. Galen probably remembers every dot in the middle I know. I remember the knife pulling incident. How did I forget that? I think it's the one time that Galen said to me, "Are you sure you knew what the heck you were doing?" And of course my response was, "Well, he didn't stab anybody, did he?" But it's a memory that Galen and I have. It's a memory of, I want to say 36, because he's only 29 now. I probably can't be 36. It just seems like his 36th birthday party. He invited me to the house over there on the Cathedral, where we lived at the time, to play my trumpet, not very well, I might add, for his 36th birthday. I think I somehow managed to get through Happy Birthday. Georgia, you'd be the boss of that. You were there because I believe you had just recently given birth to one of your children. Did the Happy Birthday come out okay on the trumpet? Oh, it was great. That's what I might expect. But that's another one of those fun times. I enjoyed my time with Galen so much, and if there's anything that I want to say now, keeping the last comment of mine to last after Greg does his thing, it's what I can only call the maniacal laughter. You sit in your office minding your own business, writing a brief, and you hear this. I can't repeat it because I'd probably be thrown out of the hotel immediately, if not sooner. But it's a laugh that you cannot possibly miss if you're anywhere within a 100-yard scope of Galen Wilson. My thought always was, either somebody just got sent to a very long term prison, or he read something in an appellant's opening brief that he just thinks is so funny that he can't restrain himself. But Galen just had that laugh. It was so intense, I would hear it, and down the hall I'd start laughing, because whatever it must have been, whatever it was, must have been pretty funny. I I'd like to open this up to some other folks. I see the food's coming out, and of course I don't want to miss my small portion. I'd like to open this up to have some other people come up to this very lectern and make some comments. I know Paul Pinto is one that would eventually like to get up here. Paul, you want to follow me? I'm an easy act to follow, Paul.
Because I have to contradict you about the drive.
Oh, all right. Feel free to touch it in.
Gail and I go back a way. We were in law school together, and I think we're probably the first person to present when we got to law school. And the first thing I learned immediately was to tell them we had great conversations while I was staring out at the roadway praying. And we just allowed that. We were in the reserves together, which was showing you that the standards were very low during the Vietnam War. They got lower. They got lower, and he and I avoided it. But in all seriousness, over the years, I have not known anyone with the integrity of Neil Will. He's been a good friend, tremendous integrity. When I met him in law school, and over the years we've been friendly adversaries. He would call me and ask me why I thought that I had an issue. But he has truly, I can't think of anyone with the integrity of Galens. And even when this morning he said to me, I was just about to call you and I knew he was lying. Having said that, he was a tremendous friend. He enjoyed his friendship over the years. And I hope he does keep in touch, even though he's wrong. I have plenty to say about Galens because he's a very curious guy. Who said?
I can remember Galen when he first came in the office in 1974. He still had red hair. Now he still has hair, but it's not red anymore. He goes through several operations and everything else. And he's now leaving the office. I look around this room here and I see the number of people that have gone on to judgeship and gone up in the office in various ways. And then there's one over there that's in the U.S. Attorney's Office. We all worked with Galen, and Galen shepherded so many of us through so much. The first real instance I got to know Galen was when he came in and took over the entrance office that we had back in the old Capitol. And he got to sit with an individual by the name of Peyton Kirk. And I think Peyton always shaped Galen's life from the first day. Peyton was a black belt in karate, and you see Galen has been practicing karate all his life and other martial arts. Peyton smoked his pipe, and Galen, of course, has smoked all of his life. We all know that Galen smoked. I think that's where his red hair went. But I first got involved in Galen personally down in the wonderful town of Florence, Arizona. We were sent down there by Bill Schaefer to try 11 inmates that were the Aryan Brotherhood at the time, which was a very, very big deal to us because we had never actually done Russian court. And we were going down to try 11 first-degree murder cases. The Aryan Brotherhood at the state prison. And Galen got so wrapped up when we started the first trial. This is why I've always liked Galen. He got so wrapped up in that trial that the judge said, will the jury stand and be sworn? And by golly, Galen stood up. And if you ever want a juror, the prosecutor, Galen is the one. Have him stand up and be sworn. Other things that he's done in the community, he's built his little cabin up there in Pine Top. He goes up there, get rid of it, get rid of all of us, and forget all these things. Bill Schaefer said to say a few things about him, and he said to say a few nice things about him, but I can't think of any nice things to say about him. It's been fun to work with Galen. He's had that infectious laughter like Dave was talking about. We've always enjoyed working with him. And I want to thank Lynn for going out and getting these presents for Galen. We know Galen's a fisherman. If you look over on that table over there, there's two more beautiful ones. He's a golfer. He's supposed to be a golfer. You sell Bibles. So Galen has, along with Peyton Kerr, has really shaped the legal community. Yeah. John Todd, looks like you have your mouth full.
Now, when Galen came to the office, to the criminal division, I was actually there as a Lowly intern. And I was there for about a year together before I went upstairs. Peyton Kerr happened to be my drill sergeant at George Washington University. And another sort of part about him, the obviously thought Galen, was that when he carried a briefcase, he carried it at Fort Orange, like this. Galen picked up that trick on it. But seriously, I do want to comment on is the professionalism, the way that Galen has lived his professional life. I have always admired, I've envied him certainly his trial experience when he was doing what Dave Powell does today, tried conflict cases in Young County. He had a great reputation, we've heard about upstairs, with the different county attorneys, and from his adversaries, that he believed that lawyers were lawyers, that even though they were on opposite sides of the fence, they still treated each other with respect and dignity, and that's the way he conducted his professional life. And certainly within the office, he was there early, left late, was a professional to the nth degree, and that's a very admirable trait, which I will always remember Galen for. Now, who would like to speak? Yeah.
Well, Galen, the one attitude I would apply to you, and I think all the rest of your colleagues would be that you're always accessible, no matter how busy you are. Certainly, when I came there in 1980, you were kind enough, and still are, to take the time to explain things to me. You taught me how to begin to behavior corpus in the language. You were just always accessible. You were always been a kind person, a deliberate person, and I will always remember you that way, and I think all of your colleagues will too. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
I know this is a time when we're supposed to be funny and humorous, but what I will always remember about you is the friendship that you extended to me. Because I came to Arizona in 1980, having been in practice back in Michigan for about a year, but never done criminal law before. I had the good fortune of moving into Phoenix very close to Galen and his family. And it kind of took me in as sort of a new son, got me to the office. For the first few weeks, I couldn't quite figure out how to get down to the office, even though that's where I was there to work. It made me feel comfortable, it made me feel like I was part of the office. I knew that Galen and his family were there for me, and I really didn't have anyone else to see me. The other thing that you did is you gave me an opportunity to become a trial lawyer. Because what Wayne didn't tell you is when he and Galen tried those Aryan Brotherhood cases, unfortunately, some of them came back. And one of the first lessons that I learned as a trial lawyer is you never want to try a case a second time or a third time. Well, unfortunately, Galen and I faced down to Florence, and we tried a case the second time, and not necessarily with the kind of result that we wanted.
Is he on the jury?
Well, by then he had figured out that he didn't need to stand up and be sworn, although I did hear that story from you, Wayne. But what you did do for me, Galen, is you helped me to understand that juries are different throughout the state. And we went down to Florence and we encountered obviously a rural Arizona jury. And you helped shape my career as a trial lawyer. I was comfortable in trial with you outside of Phoenix, outside of Tucson. And interestingly enough, my career has sort of taken that path. Even though I've tried a lot of cases, a lot of civil cases here, a lot of criminal cases here in Phoenix, I also tried a lot of cases out county. And I know, I think as you said, Sheldon back there, you were up in Flagstaff. You taught me a very valuable lesson as a trial lawyer, and that is no matter where you're at, whether you're in Phoenix, Tucson, Flagstaff, Florence, Yuma, Kingman, Navajo County, wherever, you have to be yourself. And if you're yourself in front of the jury, and you're a person of integrity and honesty, the jury will like you. And the jury will feel that you're a good lawyer and they're doing the very best for your client. And that was a very, very valuable lesson that you taught me 20 years ago. And for that, I really appreciate it and thank you. Good luck.
Well, I've known Galen Wolf now for about 27 years. I joined the office about 22 years ago.
Galen joined the office, I believe, on September 3rd of 1994. We had previously met the year before on the case of, I think, Harris, his partner. And the first time we ever spoke was outside the Arizona Supreme Court, while we were waiting for our case to be called. I was 73. And the following year, in spite of that, we joined the office. Enjoyable time then. But I think, how many of you have ridden in a car with Galen driving? Those of you that don't know, Galen believes in adhering to the speed or less. Even less than that. And there was an occasion when I was bringing one of my cars down town to be rethinking. And Galen said, well, I'll be back to come to your house, pick you up, bring you. So I had a big four-wheel pickup at the time. You who known me a long time will remember taking it out in the parking lot because it was big and it stood out. Anyway, got the house, got the pickup, I took off. I forgot about Galen's driving habit. We're heading down from Scottsdale to where the Galens Parkway is next to Scottsdale, the area to Phoenix, and somewhat adjacent to the Phoenix Zoo. And I was quite a nice little stretch there, and I suppose that if you've ridden with me, that I, the speed limit's the bottom speed. I work to make sure that it's a reasonable and prudent speed. That's sometimes significantly faster than it's supposed to be. And as I was driving, ignoring Galen back there, knowing you'd be behind me, I looked in my rear view mirror, and I was probably going 65, maybe a little more, the Parkway on Van Buren. And there is Will, sitting behind the steering wheel, both hands grasped tightly, staring straight ahead. I guarantee you, no one got between both. During that trip.
You know, at that time, one reason I had the vehicle painted was I wanted to sell it. So I had bought a nice little Nissan and had taken it in for regular maintenance. In anticipation of this, you all know, again, work closely with Galen, he takes, you know, his meetings, assignments, put this note on his calendar of who he's going to meet, when he's going to meet, and where everything is there. Plus side notes to remind him of what calendar was building, so he is not going to forget. But this was a short time after this incident that I put him through, and I took my car to be serviced somewhere along Camelback, and I think 7th Street, Avenue, somewhere in there, and Wilkes was fairly close to the time. And you know, Wilkes will do anything you ask. He'll never make an excuse. If you want his help, he'll give you his help. So he assured me that he would be there the next day, picking me up on his way to work. And knowing his habit for making sure that everything was there, and he forgot nothing, he didn't pick me up. Now, I don't know whether it was any relationship, but I waited and I waited and I waited for the hot summer day, and finally I went in and I called, and he goes, yes, Galen Wilkes is here. Sure, let me connect you. And Galen heard my voice. He said, oh, I'll be right there. 15 minutes later, he was there. But I think the one office case that comes to mind that epitomizes what some of the prior speakers have said is that Galen is meticulous in his preparation for trial. And one thing that he always wants is a picture, and usually a significant number of pictures showing the crime scene and various other aspects of the case. So this one day he asked that I pictures for him, so that was known in the office to be a hobby of mine. I had taken pictures for him several times before. And we traveled out to a market on South Main. And this is one of those markets where there was more business being conducted in front of the market than in the market. Many of you will know what market I talked about. But we drove down, and it was obvious, I think, to the people doing business in front of the market that Peter and I didn't belong there. And even so insisted that he needed the picture. So I asked him to drive several blocks away, and I would switch my telephoto lens, and I would get the picture that he wanted. As we passed this group of people, and we turned down the street, there's one man, and approximately 12 or 15 people who were doing business, walked out and watched it. And as he approached the corner, and we were definitely several blocks away, I was turning back towards the scene, so that I could take the pictures. This man dislodged himself and walked out to the corner, put his hands on his hips, and in a very belligerent way just stood there and stared at us. And as I took the picture, and I moved forward to another picture, so the gentleman continued to display his awareness of our presence, and probably displeasure at our presence. And as we drove back, we turned the corner, took an additional picture for Galen through the windshield. With my head stuck down behind, we zoomed off, and we made our getaway that time. Yeah. That was one of my fears. But he asked me to take a picture again of that scene. It was either a co-defendant or another case. It was one complex trial we were doing for the county. And this time, though, we assured him that we needed to have appropriate accompaniment before I would take any pictures. Therefore, when we arrived, I think there were about 5 or 6 policemen that arrived approximately the same time that we did, with some pictures of a different angle. The group rapidly dispersed, and Galen and I got our pictures. Galen, it's been enjoyable. I've had a great time working with you, and I wish you the best.